Um, Hi, everyone. For those of you I have not met yet, my name is Joy Mayer, and I'm part of the Election SOS team. I run a project called Trusting News, where we study perceptions of journalism and train journalists in how to demonstrate credibility and use engagement and transparency strategies to build trust. And I am so thrilled to be working with this fellowships program. So excited about the work you guys are about to do. And I'm really happy today to have Nisha Chittal with us. She's at Vox.com and just has real deep expertise in what it looks like, in a digital first newsroom, a newsroom that's really used to paying attention to what is happening in the online world in a way that I think shows real respect for what's happening in the online world, as opposed to what some newsrooms do. I didn't expect to go off on a soapbox, but hello, happy Friday. I think some newsrooms sort of chase online trends as if that's like keeping them hip or something. And I think Vox has a very like respectful, thoughtful way of reporting on the online world. And so, and Nisha's just been doing this a while. So I'm so thrilled to have Nisha here to share some really practical tips with you. I think she'll be happy to take some questions as we go. We can keep this pretty conversational. And I do encourage you to take notes. All right, Nisha, thank you so much. I think, let me just see if you're a co-host so you can share your screen. I don't know, Yamila, I don't know if I have ability to do that, to make her a co-host.
It says Joy Mayer's the co-host now. Oh, now, okay, I got a notification.
Now it's you? Awesome, okay.
Great. You are the co-host now. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Okay, let me share my screen. And I will put this in presenter mode. So I'm going to talk about monitoring audience conversations, as Joy mentioned. Thank you for that introduction, Joy. And to tell you a little bit about myself to start, I'm the Director of Audience and Engagement at Vox.com. I've been working on audience development in newsrooms for over a decade, for 12 years now. Other places I've worked, a few years ago, I led the social team at MSNBC and NBC News. I also worked before that at the Travel Channel, and before that at like digital strategy consulting agencies. And in terms of elections, this is now my third presidential election that I'm covering, and also my fourth. This year we wouldn't call it a midterm, but it's my fourth round of covering congressional elections. So I have had a lot of experience over the years covering elections, and it's a very fun topic for me. Before I dive into the presentation, one thing I just wanted to say is I am going to have some, I'll go through tools and how I use them, but I also want to do some interactive examples in real time. So what I want to ask of you guys is to think about, I don't know what newsrooms you all are in and what topics you're focusing on, but think about topics that you are focusing on in your work that you might want to try monitoring conversations on social platforms, because I'm going to ask for some volunteers at some point to like walk through a real example of how I would look for a topic on some of these tools. So please just like think in your mind and like maybe have some ideas ready if you want to try something out when we get to that portion of the presentation. So before I dive into like the tools and the tactics, I wanted to talk about kind of just some general principles of how I think about monitoring audience conversations, and how we think about this at Vox. First of all, it's an art, it's not a science. So it's never going to be as precise as we want it. We'll never be able to say, 30% of people online had positive feelings about the debate. There's lots of people who have tried to develop tools that measure online sentiment or, say that they can track all conversations on a topic. It's just not like it's just not that precise. People use different keywords. People, write in different ways on social media platforms. So it's never going to be a precise science. We just have to keep that in mind. But we can, using the tools that we have, we can do the best that we can to, pull sort of representative samples of what the audience is talking about and what is relevant to you. The other thing I would think about is determining your goals first before you dive into monitoring conversations on social platforms. Think about what do you want to get out of this? Do you want to pitch story ideas to your newsrooms? Do you want to find trends before local trends before they reach a national audience? Think about like what your goals are, and talk to your newsroom about it too. Talk to editors and reporters in your newsroom and find out what their goals are and what would be helpful to them. And then you can sort of align the information that you are pulling from these platforms. You can align that with their goals to better help them in their work and their reporting. Pick the tools and platforms that are relevant to you. There's tons of tools. I'm going to go through a bunch. And there's obviously tons of social media platforms. You don't need to be necessarily looking at every tool and every platform. You want to manage like information overload. So pick the things that that feel most relevant to your newsroom, to your beat, to whatever you may be working on. And then I'll talk about this more at the end, but I think one of the most important things about doing this kind of work is filtering and curating. There's tons of information on social media. There's tons of conversations. You don't want to give people in your newsroom a fire hose of information. You want to give them only the things that are most relevant to them and most useful to their needs and to their work. So you want to take that like vast sea of information that's on social media platforms and filter and give them a curated sort of collection of things that are most relevant to them. And I'll talk more about like best practices for doing that later in the presentation. So those are kind of my key principles. Okay, so I'm going to dive into really tactical stuff of different tools for looking at different platforms and how to use them. And throughout this this portion of the presentation, after I go through each tool, I'll take down my slides and show you like an interactive example. So that's where I'll be looking for you guys to offer up sample topics that you want to try searching. So get those ready. Okay. Toolkit. These are a handful of my favorite tools for monitoring social conversations, the ones that I find myself using the most. TweetDeck, Twitter Advanced Search, Google Trends, which looks at search trends, CrowdTangle, which looks at trending conversations, particularly across Facebook, and then Chartbeat Rising, which looks at what stories are doing well across different news publisher websites. I'm going to go through each of these tools in a little bit more granular detail, and then we'll do examples. So Twitter Advanced Search. Twitter Advanced Search is really powerful, and it allows you to search Twitter, but put a lot of filtering tools in place so that you can find, from the vast sea of like, there's 100,000 tweets on a topic and you really want to find certain ones that are most relevant to you. It allows you to really sort of narrow down those search results. So obviously in the first screenshot, we'll start going left to right. You can search by keywords. You can look for exact phrases. You can look for hashtags. You can look for, you can limit some of these certain keywords. So like if you want just coronavirus and not COVID-19, for instance, you could put that keyword that you don't want to show up in none of these words. The accounts section here is also really helpful. It allows you to filter, like, are there certain accounts that you want to see? Like if you're looking for tweets from a specific user, you could put their handle in there. If you're looking for tweets that mention a specific user, you can put that in mentioning these accounts. That helps you to like look at, there's a great example built in right there of like, maybe you want to see all tweets about Caltrain. And so you can look at tweets that mention Caltrain. Some of these filters below that allow you to filter out, like maybe you don't want to see replies. Like sometimes I toggle that off because I only want to see original tweets about a topic. I don't necessarily want to see other people's replies. There's a toggle for links. So maybe you only want to see tweets that have links in them, or maybe you don't want to see tweets with links in them because you want to see like original, especially if you're looking for like firsthand eyewitness accounts on a breaking news story. You might not want tweets with links because those tend to be people who are not eyewitnesses, but are sharing links to articles about the news event. So you might turn off links so that you can find just tweets with text from people who are on the ground at the scene of something and are tweeting eyewitness accounts. And then engagement lets you filter out tweets that have low engagement. So if you only want to find tweets with high engagement, this is great for like high volume conversation topics. Coronavirus is a good example of like, there's probably millions of tweets that have the word coronavirus. And so if you're trying to find only, you know, really substantive ones that have gotten a lot of traction already, you might set engagement thresholds here, and you can put in a threshold for minimum number of replies or likes or retweets. So sometimes I might, when I'm doing this, I might set like minimum retweets at, I don't know, 50, just to sort of filter out like smaller accounts and less relevant accounts and have Twitter serve me only results that have a lot of engagement. Therefore, they're likely to be more relevant to what I'm looking for. Then you can also set dates here. So you can, you know, if you're looking for a certain time frame, maybe you're looking at something that happened today or yesterday. Maybe you're looking at something historical and you want to go back and look at tweets from a certain time period in the past. This is really helpful for that because you can set a start and end date of what exact time period you want to look at. Okay, let's do an example. I'm gonna switch off my slides, and I would love to hear, is there a volunteer with an example that you want to try looking at in Twitter Advanced Search?
We could look for Proud Boys being mentioned in tweets.
Yeah, let's try that. Sorry, I have to move my little Zoom toggle because it's covering my tabs. Okay, you guys can see my screen with Twitter Advanced Search, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so Twitter Advanced Search, you'll want to bookmark this link. It's not super easy to find within Twitter, but I just like bookmark this link, or I will just Google Twitter Advanced Search and it's easier to find it that way. Let's say we're going to put Proud Boys in all of these words because we want both of those words to show up. Or actually, maybe I'll just put it in this exact phrase because I don't want tweets that have proud and boys in them somewhere in the tweet. I want this exact phrase, Proud Boys. And I'm not going to put in any particular accounts. Maybe I just want to see what the conversations are. I think I'll include tweets with links. And then I'll probably set the threshold to like, I think there's probably a lot of conversation about Proud Boys. So I'm going to set kind of a higher threshold, maybe like 150 retweets, because I imagine the volume of this is pretty high. And then since Trump mentioned this at the debate last week, that was that's September 29th. So I'm actually going to look at September 29th to September 30th. Let's see what the Proud Boys conversation was around the debate. So I'm going to search for this. And then basically it puts sort of all the filters you just put in, it puts them into search and shows you search results. So now it's showing me only tweets with a minimum of 150 retweets about Proud Boys during that time period of the debate. So these are like pretty solid. It looks like people are sharing a lot of articles about Proud Boys, some reports around things they were doing in Portland, which I was not even aware of. This looks like an interesting, like, first-person account. I don't look at. But this is basically showing you like tweets with high engagement on this topic. So it easily lets you sort of cut through all the noise, because if you just like, if we took out the retweet filter and just looked at Proud Boys, you get a lot more conversation, and it would be harder to sort of filter through it and figure out like what is actually important here. Some of these tweets here are not relevant to me. Like this is a guy sharing a meme. These are just, you know, this is a TV clip. Like these things might not help me with reporting or what I'm looking for. So that is how Twitter Advanced Search works. I'm going to go back to the slides. TweetDeck. So I'll go through TweetDeck next. TweetDeck is also very powerful. If you're not familiar with TweetDeck, it is a tool for Twitter that is, it allows you to have several columns. It has very powerful search capabilities. And it is really a great way to keep an eye on multiple things in Twitter at one time, because you can set up many different columns of different topics you're monitoring or lists you're monitoring. So it's very, very helpful. And it also updates and refreshes in real time as new tweets are coming through. Its search capabilities are similar to Twitter Advanced Search, but then you can create a column in your TweetDeck for that saved search. You can filter, just like Twitter Advanced Search, you can filter by keywords, you can put in dates, you can exclude certain keywords. I also like that its author filters are a little bit stronger. So when you're filtering by tweet authors, you can also filter to verified users only if you want tweets only from verified accounts. And then you can also filter to like members of a specific Twitter list. Let's say you have a Twitter list for reporters in Portland, and you want to filter to just that list in your search, like only reporters in Portland. You can sort of filter your search that way, and then search by keyword on top of that. You can also filter in TweetDeck by content type. So this really lets you narrow down tweets even more. The default is it'll show you all tweets, but you can also filter to only show tweets with images. Maybe you're looking for eyewitness reports from something, and you want people's photos. We would do this a lot when I was at NBC. We would do this a lot for big weather stories like hurricanes and big snowstorms. We would often look for like people's photos of blizzards and like photos of traffic backed up on highways and things like that, like photos that people were sharing from the scene of wherever they were. So tweets with images can be helpful for that. You can also search by tweets with videos or GIFs or links, or any media means like basically any of these things counts as media. You can also filter just like Twitter Advanced Search by engagement level. So you can set thresholds for retweets, likes, and replies. And then this screenshot's a little small, but I'll switch over to my TweetDeck in a second so you can take a look at it in real time. Basically, it allows you to have all of these different columns to keep track of many different things at once. So let me pull up my TweetDeck. This is what TweetDeck looks like for me. This is a tool that I use very often. So my home column is just my feed of everyone I follow. And like I said, it refreshes in real time as new tweets come in. So it's kind of constantly moving. And a new tweet just came in. You don't have to like refresh it or anything. It just updates on its own. And then obviously you've got like notifications. And then basically I've got all these other columns for things that I want to keep an eye on. So because I run the audience team at Vox, a lot of these columns I've set up to filter, to pipe in specific accounts, like our Twitter accounts that I want to monitor. I want to monitor the Vox Twitter account. These are some of our sub-brand accounts, The Goods and Recode and Today Explained. I keep the AP Planner account in here because I find their alerts helpful. I've got, you can put in Twitter lists. So I've got a couple of Twitter lists here. One is for Vox.com staff. This allows me to see what all of our Vox reporters are tweeting. So I can scroll through this column and see all of their different tweets from our reporters and editors and staff. Top journalism linkers. It's just a list that I think somebody made a long time ago. It's not a list I've created. It's a list someone else has made that just has a lot of journalists who share really good links. And so I tend to find a lot of media news through this Twitter list. So I keep an eye on this to sort of have a pulse on media news. You can also set up columns to monitor tweets with certain links. So this is actually I have a newsletter on Substack, and I like to see what people are tweeting about my newsletter. So I just put in a link to my newsletter here, and I can see tweets about it from anyone that is tweeting a link to my newsletter. And then you can do searches. So a sample search that I did here was Breonna Taylor, and I'll actually go through. If you want to open up, actually, I'll just do this. If you want to create a column for a search, go over here to search, and you can put in Breonna Taylor, and then you click on this little icon in the top right corner, and this is where you have all your filtering options. So tweet content matches Breonna Taylor. Maybe I want only last week. So, last week was what, 27th. I don't know what time it is anymore. So I only want to look at last week. I want to limit engagement to 50 retweets. And I want tweet authors who are verified. So I can filter out like some of this other like noise that's sort of not helping me find what I want to find. So now I can see news and updates shared about Breonna Taylor from verified users, which, you know, tends to like help me find a little bit more substantive conversation if you're looking on something that's like a big story and you're looking for accounts from or reports from, you know, journalists or other people who have verified accounts. Now, if you're looking for like a local news story and you're looking for regular people and what they are saying about this story, then verified accounts probably won't be the filter for you, because it would filter out people who are not verified. But it's just an option that exists, and that can be helpful. So that is how TweetDeck works. You can create a new column over here if you just click this plus button, and there's a bunch of different types of column options you can add. You can add a user if you want to monitor a specific user's account, a search column, that's what I just did, and you can put in your keywords and your filters. If you want to monitor a list, you would click on lists, and oh God, I have so many Twitter lists, but like all the Twitter lists that you've ever created and subscribed to show up here. So you can also add Twitter lists from other people. So I still have a whole bunch in here from my like NBC days of like, we made one that was all our reporters covering the 2016 political convention. This was a long time ago. Or the Ferguson protests. There won't be much probably in this list anymore, but we used to make Twitter lists for monitoring accounts that were talking about different protests or different sort of local things that were happening. And then I would set these up in a column in TweetDeck so that I could monitor what the conversations were from those accounts in real time. So lists are great. You can also add a column for what is trending on Twitter. So you can see trending topics, and this is also super useful, and it shows you what the volume of tweets are on each of these topics. Right now, I think I have mine set to United States trends, but like it says here, you can customize your trends based on the accounts that you have. I have a bunch of other Vox accounts in here. You can also customize by location. Maybe you want to see what the trends are in Italy or another country or region that you're looking at. You can really customize that by location. So you can sort of make it more relevant to you and whatever area you might be in or whatever area you might be reporting on. I find this super helpful, and I look at these Twitter trends throughout the day to see what people are talking about. Right now, clearly the big story is this like plot that happened in Michigan to kidnap Governor Whitmer. So that has over 1 million tweets. So I find these data points here really helpful as well. I'll pause here. Questions about TweetDeck or anything you want to try seeing in real time in TweetDeck?
I see you have a couple lists that are searches for Breonna Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to customize the name of one of those columns so that you know specifically what that search is for Breonna Taylor, or do you just have to remember?
I think you just have to remember. Unfortunately, it's only going to show like what the keyword is at the top for a search column. I don't know of a way to rename the column. I don't think that sort of option exists in here. So you sort of just have to remember, unfortunately. Any other questions? I'll check the chat too. Oh, notes from Joy. Great.
That is just me commenting as you go.
Great. No, I love those notes. Yes, and you can reorder them based on what you're most needing to pay attention to. That's a great tip too. I do often change these around. Sometimes I will move, you can just sort of drag and drop here with this little line here. So like maybe I want to move trending because you have to scroll so far over there to get to it. Like maybe I want this to be easier to see. Having a little bit of a hard time with dragging and dropping right now. But I want to move this all the way over here. That way I can more easily see it without having to scroll all the way over. Okay, so that's TweetDeck. It is a very, very useful tool. I'm gonna go back to, well, we just looked at TweetDeck. I'm gonna put this back in presenter mode. Okay, a couple other tips I wanted to share. One is, I just talked about Twitter lists, and I just wanted to share a tip that I find really helpful for finding Twitter lists. Many times you might be creating Twitter lists yourself for your newsroom, but if you want to look for existing lists that others have created and you want to subscribe to those lists, a sort of easy Google hack to do this is you go to Google and you type in site:/twitter.com/ and then you put an asterisk and then /lists and then a space and then whatever keyword you're looking for. So basically that asterisk serves, so the way that like Twitter lists are structured, in their URL is structured is always twitter.com/ the username of the person /lists and then whatever the name of the list is. So that asterisk filters out like what the username is, could be any person's username, and then it allows us to find Twitter lists by URL that have a certain keyword you're looking for. So if I were looking for Twitter lists that have politics in the name, this is the exact keyword search that I would put into Google, and then it returned for me a bunch of different Twitter lists from people that have created politics Twitter lists to monitor political conversations. So looking at these, like I recognize like Dee Leonhardt is a New York Times journalist, so I might be more inclined to like trust his list. I like that he's got politics by women because maybe I want to see more women political reporters in my feed. It's also a list from Jay Rosen, who is a journalism professor, so I sort of trust that like his list will probably be good quality and will be like reputable accounts to follow. So this is just a little hack that I like for finding Twitter lists. Okay, moving on from Twitter, I'm going to talk about CrowdTangle. So CrowdTangle is a tool that originally started as a startup and was later, a few years ago, it was acquired by Facebook. And what it does is it pulls Facebook posts. It basically tracks Facebook posts and their like publicly available engagement data. So interactions, likes, comments, shares. And it measures for you when posts are overperforming relative to that specific Facebook page's average performance. So if your page on average gets 200 shares per post. And then it was getting, a post got 400 shares instead of 200. That's overperforming by like, I don't know, whatever percentage. So it gives everything an overperforming score, and it helps you identify basically posts that are taking off on Facebook, that are getting higher than average engagement relative to, their pages, normal engagement levels. And then it allows you to like group those pages. So you can create a group for like, I want to monitor local news pages in Iowa, or I want to monitor, like one thing I look at is just like a list of like news sites that are competitors to Vox. I have a list for that in CrowdTangle, and I look at those to see what posts are overperforming for them on Facebook, like what stories are doing well with their audience that might be of interest to the Vox audience too. And that's a way to find story ideas that are doing well with similar audiences that I can then bring back to our editors and say, hey, people are really interested in this story over at Slate or at Vice. Like maybe this is something we want to cover. Now, to get access to CrowdTangle, newsrooms do have to apply for it. It's free. They have to be registered in the Facebook News Page Index. You'll get these slides later, and that News Page Index thing is hyperlinked to like where you apply for that. So you can go do that if you want to. If that's too complicated, or your newsroom can't do that or can't get verified for some reason, they do also have a bunch of publicly available resources specifically around the election that anyone can access, even if you don't have CrowdTangle access. So in the screenshot here, they've basically created a bunch of dashboards that help you monitor overperforming posts on a bunch of different election-related topics. So there are dashboards for 2020 candidates, specifically presidential candidates. They have dashboards that drill a little bit more into local races like House and Senate and gubernatorial races. They have dashboards for each of the presidential debates. There is a bunch of things. Actually, I'm going to switch over and we can take a look. So this is the hub where all of these are available, and they're available to anyone. There's also dashboards for swing states. So if you're in a local newsroom and maybe you're focusing on your state, there are dashboards for those, and there's dashboards for conversations around voting as well. So let's take a look at one of these. One that I use a little bit more because Vox covers national news is this presidential and VP display. So what this does is it's basically a dashboard that's monitoring accounts from the presidential candidates. And they do include like third-party candidates too. So you'll see a couple other people in here that I'm a little bit less familiar with. So here it gives you a feed of their posts. Here it gives you a table of how many interactions they are seeing and who's getting the most interaction. Donald Trump's Facebook page clearly gets a lot more engagement than Joe Biden's Facebook page. You can also see their Instagram posts in this column. You can see their Instagram engagement. It seems weird that Donald Trump's Instagram isn't getting much engagement. I feel like something might be wrong with that. But Joe Biden's Instagram account is getting, it has had 42,000 interactions today on one post. And then there's a feed for VP candidates, like their posts, and then also their interactions on their pages. And then their Instagram, same thing for their Instagram accounts. So I find these dashboards helpful for like keeping track of all the candidates in one place, if that's the thing that you're monitoring. Maybe you are, maybe you're covering news in Arizona, and so maybe you want to look at the Arizona specific dashboard for local news. And then this aggregates a lot of local Facebook pages in Arizona. So you'll see news, you'll see members of Congress and politicians. You'll see a bunch of different things here. This column shows overperforming posts. So this is what I was talking about earlier, which is posts that are overperforming relative to how that page normally does. So where it says here 17.08x, that's basically saying this page is doing this post is doing 17 times better than this page's posts normally do. So this is really taking off for them because they have this photo. It looks like it's a local cafe, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris stopped by, and they got a photo with them together. And that's doing better than the cafe's normal posts, which is probably not surprising. This is a local news station in Arizona. And so this post about Taylor Swift showing her support for Biden and Harris is doing 9 times better than KOLD's posts normally do on Facebook. So that's really taking off for them. So this is really nice because it filters out, like, basically it's set it up. They've set up a list of Arizona Facebook pages, but then they've set up a filter in CrowdTangle so that you only see mention, like, posts that are related to the 2020 election. You're not seeing every post from KOLD News 13. You're only seeing their posts that relate to the election, which might be more useful to you. And then you can also see groups. It can track Facebook groups if they are, like, public. They need to be, like, they can't be private groups, but they can track public group data. So here they're showing Arizona 2020 election related Facebook groups. So looks like there's a group for Joe Biden for Arizona, and they're getting quite a bit of engagement on some of their posts. So these dashboards are super useful. I would encourage you to check them out, depending on the topics you're covering and the news you're covering. There is something for almost everyone here, and these are available to anyone, even if your newsroom doesn't have CrowdTangle. I'm gonna check the chat to see if there's questions. Oh, great. Okay, just comments. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my slides. Okay, so CrowdTangle live displays. Oh, I just showed you this. This is the presidential and VP one. Now I'm gonna talk about Google Trends. I use Google Trends a ton. I probably look at it every day. I find this, it's not social media, but it is, to me, a really important way of keeping a pulse on what audiences are interested in, is understanding what they're searching for. And Google Trends data is publicly available to anyone, and they have tons of data on their website that's very easy to browse. They show what the top trending searches are for the past 24 hours. So each day I like to look at, like, what are the trends of the day. I took this screenshot a couple days ago, so VP debate was trending that day. And also clearly a lot of sports stories. It shows you volume for recent trending searches. So Claudia Conway had 200,000 plus searches. Rudy Giuliani had 200,000 plus searches. Eddie Van Halen had 5 million searches. So it shows you, it gives you a little bit of a sense of volume for these trending searches. And then it also shows you, kind of what keywords are trending related to them, what stories are showing up for those search results. So you can understand, like, more context on the story and what links people are seeing. And then specifically on elections, Google Trends has some great resources. One is that within Google Trends, they specifically have an election hub where they show top questions people are searching around the election, how much search interest each of the candidates are getting. I'll pull that page up in a second and we can take a look at it, but it has a ton of election specific data that they're updating pretty regularly, almost every day, I think. And then Google Trends also has a great Twitter account where they just tweet out little snapshots of search trends. So I love to follow them, and they're great during live events. Like during debates, they'll tweet about search trends that are spiking during the debate. Maybe more people are searching for Joe Biden's healthcare plan because he mentioned healthcare during the debate, and then people went to Google and looked for it. So I find that really helpful, and it tells us what audiences are searching for and what they're looking for, and then that's information we can bring to our editors and say, people have tons of questions about Joe Biden's healthcare plan because that is a top search on Google right now, and it has over 500,000 searches. And so maybe we want to do more coverage of Joe Biden's healthcare plan. Maybe we want an explainer on what's in his healthcare plan. Also, Google Trends has a email list, and I cannot recommend it enough. Anyone can sign up for this mailing list where they send out basically a daily email every day, and sometimes they send one-off emails for special events like a presidential debate, and they will include a roundup of top trending searches that are sort of noteworthy that day and how much they've spiked. So this was from a couple days ago, I think, when Trump was released from the hospital. And the top search trend that day was Trump returns to White House, and the interest in that spiked 3,650% in the past day. They also have, so they have like a wide range of sort of news trends here that they sort of curate and filter out for people. I would recommend signing up for this, and I have a link in this slide deck to the sign up page, but anyone can sign up, and it's very, very, very useful. And this has really helped us a lot. We use this in the Vox newsroom to think about, okay, these are the things that are rising on Google search. Do we have coverage on these things? Should we have coverage on these things? Like maybe we need, this one here, down here, Susan Page and Pence Harris debate moderator. So that tells us like, okay, maybe we should do a breakout story on the debate, specifically about who the debate moderator is and what their history is with Trump and what you need to know about Susan Page. I'm actually going to pull my slides down here and pop over to Google Trends. So this is Google Trends. You can put any keyword here that you want to look for. But then they also have all these different curated pages. So let's say I want to look at the election hub. This is the election page that I had a screenshot of on that slide. So here you can see search interest on the candidates in the past day. There's a whole page for debates, which I won't click into right now. This shows you like search interest by state and where people are searching the election the most. If you click on this map, you can see a little bit more detail, and you can also switch over to like a different, just like a regular shaped map. And then what I love here is they also have displays on top searched issues, topics. So people are really interested in unemployment in the Supreme Court, obviously is a big one right now. Top questions. So this will show you top election related search questions in the past 7 days. So you can understand what questions people are asking. And then there's also breakout pages for a whole bunch of different topics. So you can click into any of these things and see like more specific search trends on that specific topic and really drill into whatever it is that you're looking for. Highly recommend Google Trends. I use this pretty much every day.
Nisha, do you mind if I mention one other thing about that?
Yeah, please.
Something we've really learned through Election SOS is how often people are searching for really basic information that it might actually be hard to find on our website because it starts too basic. Journalists like to cover the complexity of things. And a lot of times what people are searching for is like, one of the things we learned from folks at First Draft is that after one of the big Brexit votes in the UK, the top searched for term the next day was, what is the European Union? And when you think about what it signifies, that like a big vote just happened, and then people are like, this is the story I have in my head about it. People are then like, what just happened? And they don't even understand like the most basic things. And so sometimes what I find is that newsrooms used Google Trends to like step back out and just remember to say like, does your headline answer the basic questions? Is there a graph up high that answers the most basic questions? It's really useful to see like what words people are using and not just topics to cover, but like, oh, we're starting from there, are we?
Yes, that is a really good point. And it's something we think about a lot in our newsroom too at Vox of like, so one thing that I do or my team does during big news events like the debate, for instance, we'll be monitoring Google Trends in real time during the debate to see what people are searching for. And we will periodically share updates in like our politics Slack channel where we're talking about the debate with reporters and editors. And it is often a really good reminder to the reporters and editors that, yeah, people, like, we should never lose sight of what the audience actually needs from us. And often those are like more basic questions. And sometimes our, political reporters especially have a tendency to maybe be really wonky and get in the weeds of policy issues or like the political sort of horse race news cycle. And seeing the audience questions on Google Trends can often remind them that like that might not be, like, the really weedsy stuff might not be what the audience is thinking about or what they want to know about. They often are asking like broader, sort of more basic questions. So it's a really good way to sort of keep perspective about that. Okay, Chartbeat Rising. I'll just look at this tool sort of quickly because I know we're a little bit short on time. What I like about this is Chartbeat, if you guys are not familiar with it, is a real-time traffic tool that a lot of publishers use. And what I love about this is available to anyone. Like, you don't have to be a newsroom that uses Chartbeat. And what it does is it shows you topics that are popular across the internet based on like data from Chartbeat member sites. So what this tells me right now is in real time, like, oh, like if I click on this Pelosi bubble, I can see these are stories about Nancy Pelosi that are doing well from several different news outlets. Or Star Wars is trending. Here's where I admit that I don't know anything about Star Wars. So, so like maybe there's a new Star Wars. I'm not. I would probably need to read one of these to glean what this is. But the size of the bubble here is telling me that there's a lot of interest in this, and there are a lot of stories. And you can also click out to any of these stories. 2020 election, 25th Amendment. Ooh, this one interests me because the 25th Amendment is what might allow Mike Pence to become acting president if Trump gets sicker. So it seems like there's rising interest, like people want to know about the 25th Amendment and what it might do, what it might mean. This is related to Nancy Pelosi. So you can sort of see all the stories that are doing well for these outlets on this topic. So this is a great way to see like what's trending for different publishers. Like this is what's doing well for different publishers at any given time, like in real time. Chartbeat's a very real time tool. So I like to use this to sort of get a pulse of what's doing well across the internet right now. And there are categories to filter here a little bit. If you are like, well, I don't care about this entertainment stuff because I'm only focused on the election, you could filter to just news, and then it'll show you only news stories. Okay, back to my presentation. So I've got all the links here for everything I just talked about. So when you get this slide deck later, there are hyperlinks here for all of the tools, for the sign up for the Google Trends newsletter, and then also for registering news pages on Facebook. Like if you're trying to get your newsroom access to CrowdTangle, that's what you'd need to do. And then if you're a freelancer, you can also, the CrowdTangle people told me that you can also register as a journalist with Facebook and then apply for CrowdTangle access to get it yourself if you're a freelancer. So all of these links are here for reference. So those are all the tools and all the things you can do. So now you have all this data, and I wanted to talk about what you now do with all the data that you have access to. So the next step is sharing those findings with your newsroom. The first thing I'm going to say is it's really important, I think, to ask editors and reporters what their needs are and really understand like what is helpful to them. So ask them questions about what they want from social media, like what would be helpful to them, what do they want to know. And then when you are sharing findings from social media with them, or maybe you're pitching story ideas based on social media conversations, make sure that your pitches align with their needs. I would say like a corollary to this is sort of like picking your battles. Like sometimes, editors may not have enough reporters to cover every story that's out there, and they have to pick and choose. So when you are pitching things, you also want to pick and choose and give them only the things that you think are like most important, most relevant to them, align with their beats and what they cover, and what your publication covers, and make sure that, you are adding value. I talked about this earlier, but to expand more, you really want to curate and filter. This is, I think, one of the most essential parts of doing this type of work. Is there's a fire hose of information on social media, and you don't want to give that whole fire hose to reporters and editors who are very busy, who are trying to write and edit and stay on top of the news of the day. You want to curate and give them, again, only what is most relevant to them. Make it easy to read, make it easy to digest, make it quick and succinct and concise, but contextual, like contextualize things. Like, don't give them like a list of like, here's the list of trending topics on Twitter. They might not be able to suss out like, what does this keyword or this hashtag mean? And they don't have time to go like investigate it and track it down and figure out what this word means. Like, they need you to explain it to them with a line of context. I think that data points, when available, are always really helpful to illustrate your case. They won't always be available. Like, there are many times on social media platforms when you don't have, like, the platform just doesn't always give you numbers. However, sometimes they do. So when they are available, I think it's always really helpful to make your case, to be able to say, oh, this thing has 1 million searches on Google, or this Michigan story, this Michigan governor story is it's a top trending topic on Twitter, and it has over 1 million tweets about it. Those kinds of like data points just help sort of hammer home like how big of a story something is, and sort of make your case if you think it's really important and you want your newsroom to cover it. And then I would just say framing and context is everything. It's really important to like not just give people a list of trending topics, but tell people, why does this matter? How big is this conversation? And put it in context to help them understand what the conversation is about. Many of our reporters and editors, well, especially editors, I think, reporters often I find are more active on Twitter sometimes, but editors in particular, often, at least at Vox, I shouldn't speak for every newsroom, our editors at Vox are often not on Twitter because they're really busy editing stories all day. And so they're not looking at Twitter, and they might not know what the trending topics are and what they mean. And so not just giving them a list of trending topics, but putting it in context to help them understand will make their jobs easier when they're looking at the data that you give them and they're trying to evaluate and decide, like, should we cover any of these stories? A few formats for sharing findings. Some things that we do at Vox. One is if you have CrowdTangle, CrowdTangle has a very nice Slack integration, and we have set up Slack rooms that have alerts on overperforming posts on different topics or from different lists of pages. So maybe you set it up to pipe in overperforming posts from our Arizona local news Facebook list, so you can see what's doing well in CrowdTangle without having to like go over to the Slack dashboard or the CrowdTangle dashboard. Some other things we like to do, a daily morning trends email, I think can be really helpful. I would say, like, figure out, talk to your newsroom leadership and figure out what is most useful to them. I would say these three things are like ideas, but every newsroom is different. How your newsroom operates is different, and you need to figure out like what works best for your newsroom. A daily morning trends email can work well for some newsrooms. I think it works well for us. And I'll show you some examples of what that looks like on the next slide. And then if your newsroom has a daily news meeting, one thing I've done in the past is when I was at MSNBC, we had like a morning news meeting every day at 8:30. And I would always, before that meeting, I would look through CrowdTangle and look through Twitter and all my tools and like do a little sweep and figure out what are the stories that are trending on social media this morning that I think are worth us covering, that I think the rest of the news editors in this morning meeting need to know about. And I would bring like 3 or 4, like not like you don't want to overload I would bring like 3 or 4 pitches to the daily news meeting every day. And I had, you know, as each editor goes through, like, this is what's coming from our section today. When they came to me, the audience person, I would say, here's a few things that are trending in terms of audience conversations this morning that might be relevant story ideas for us. And I would give them 3 or 4 quick pitches. So again, these are all ideas. It's important to figure out like what works for your newsroom in terms of how they operate. Maybe they don't have a daily news meeting. Maybe different things work for different newsrooms, and you sort of have to like talk to your editors and decide what works best for them. Whatever format you choose, I would just emphasize that you want it to be clear and concise and quickly digestible if it's written. Like you don't want to send people a wall of text that's hard to parse. And make sure you have relevant context for those newsroom editors who like don't know what a hashtag means out of context and they need you to explain it to them. Examples. So the example on over here, this small example is not enough context. So this is a list. These are real examples from emails that have been sent at Vox. These are old. They're from like 2019. And they're both from the same day, so that you can sort of compare how they look different, even though they cover the same stories. So both of these were reports on like, okay, what's trending on Twitter this morning? One of them was just a list of hashtags. This doesn't really tell me a lot. Like, why is chief hostage negotiator trending? I don't know what that means. I now need to go to Twitter and look it up and try to figure it out. Why is chief trending? I don't know. I don't know what NOC or O means. None of these things sort of make sense to me out of context. The version over here is mostly the same trends. It was the same morning, but with much more context underneath each one. So the chief hostage negotiator one is like probably a little too long. Like I think 2 paragraphs is probably a lot for people to read. Especially people who are like scrolling through this email on their phone first thing in the morning. I would try to keep that in mind, like try to keep in mind the context in which people are reading this. But one thing I like here is that the actual trending keywords are bolded, so it's easier at a glance to understand what the trends are, and then there's a line or 2 summarizing the trend underneath it. So if I'm interested, I can quickly read and understand why is chief trending, why is chief hostage negotiator trending. I would say like the ones for chief and Days Gone and Avengers Endgame are like the right sort of length I would strive for. The chief hostage negotiator one is probably a little too much, and you want to make sure people don't like skip over it because they're like, that's too much text, I don't have time to read it. But this is what I mean of like, it's got context, but it's also easy to look at a glance, and it's very digestible. And it has, you know, the keywords bolded, and then a 1 or 2 sentence summary underneath each one. This was, you know, a trend email that we would like send around to the audience team and some editors to help them decide, like, do I want to think about covering any of these stories today? I also just wanted to touch on, UGC. If you are, you know, as you're monitoring social media conversations and you're coming across content from UGC, if you're not familiar, is user-generated content. So I just want to encourage everyone to be skeptical. You are journalists, so if you see something on Twitter, it may not always be true. When I was at MEC, we did a lot of social news gathering around breaking stories, like if there was a plane crash or a protest or you know, something as sort of benign as a snowstorm, and we would look for people tweeting photos of those events, right? But when you're looking on Twitter, you always want to verify. Like, you don't, like, some people repost other people's photos and pretend like it was theirs and pretend they were there when they weren't. And some people, obviously, like, especially this year, we all know that there's like a huge misinformation problem. So you always want to verify something before you say, like, oh, I'm going to take this user's tweet and put it on TV or put it in, embed it in a story or write a story around it. There's been several times when outlets have been sort of like embarrassed because they took a tweet that they thought was true and they wrote a whole story around it, and then it turned out the tweet was false or was a joke tweet or something, and they had to issue a correction. So the bottom line is be skeptical, verify. If you want to use user-generated content in your reporting, my sort of best practices are that you should always reach out, identify yourself and your outlet, and ask them, A, like if it's a photo, did they take this photo? Make sure it's like really theirs, and not that they reposted it from someone else. And then B, if they did take it, ask if you can have permission to use it for your outlet. If you're doing this type of work, I would also strongly recommend make sure your profile is complete, it's professional, and it's clear about where you work. People should be able to look at your profile and see a photo and see what outlet you work at, and that you are like a legitimate journalist. And like if you have sort of just like a personal account that doesn't say where you work and isn't sort of clear in your bio, they might be less likely to want to engage. And then also just be sensitive in the wake of tragic news. This might not be super relevant because we're focused on the election, but oftentimes like when there's a breaking news story about, let's say, a shooting, and a lot of reporters will turn to Twitter and start searching for eyewitness firsthand accounts from that shooting, and then they might find somebody tweeting about it, and they might all start replying to that person and sort of bombarding them with requests to talk or to share their tweet on TV or to interview or whatever. And people can get overwhelmed, especially if they've just been through something traumatic. So just keep in mind that we want to be sensitive in the wake of any sort of very heavy or tragic news. Questions. I don't know how much time I have left. Joy, how am I doing?
Yeah, I think we're a couple minutes over, and I thought you guys had something right now. I was getting a little nervous, but you don't, right? There's a break before the next one.
Yeah, there's a break.
Awesome. So yeah, we can take a couple minutes for questions if you guys have them. Nisha, thank you so much. This is so useful.
No problem. Any questions?
I do have one.
Yeah.
I'm new to monitoring. This is something that first time doing it. It seems really overwhelming. There's so many tools to use, so many places to look, so many things to look up. I'm just curious, how do you know where to start, and how do you form a reliable workflow?
That's a great question. Can I ask what newsroom are you in, and like what is your beat?
I'm going to be working at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and I'm going to be looking at news tips and online engagement. But as far as the specific goals, I still have yet to have a meeting about that. So yeah, I'm waiting on the specifics of what they're looking for. Okay.
Well, I would say, maybe if you are looking, let's just hypothetical, like if you were looking at Wisconsin local like congressional elections, since you're at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, one thing I would do if I were you, I'd probably do some research and find local Wisconsin politicians and journalists on Twitter and make a Twitter list, and then like set that up as a column in your tweet deck that you want to monitor. You can set your Twitter trends to show a specific location. That you don't do in TweetDeck. You have to do it like in your Twitter account settings, but you can say like, I'm in Milwaukee, I want to see Milwaukee specific trends, and it will show you Milwaukee specific trending topics. If you have CrowdTangle, you can set up a list of Milwaukee or Wisconsin specific pages to monitor. One thing I like about CrowdTangle, if you do have it, is you can also configure it to set up to send you like a daily email. So I get like a daily report of interesting Facebook posts. I would sort of like basically like figure out like, this is my this is my topic and this is my goal, and then configure like 2 or 3 things. Like you don't necessarily need to use everything, but I would pick like 2 or 3 things that are going to help you achieve those goals, and configure those tools or those dashboards to really work for you, and then just focus on those.
You can't ever get it all.
So
it's not the nature of this kind of work.
So it's not about using all the tools. It's
No.
finding which few tools work best for me. and focusing on those. Gotcha.
Yes,
That's a lot
exactly.
of help. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? All right, well, Nisha, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Really,
no
really
problem.
appreciate your time. And I will thank you for offering to share the slide deck. I will stick that in Slack later, you guys, along with my deck from earlier today and information from the misinformation searching stuff with First Draft yesterday. So have a nice little break and enjoy the rest of your training. And thank you so much. I'll see you guys on Slack.
Thanks.